And maybe just a special thanks to Caroline for moderating and facilitating the session. So thanks again, Caroline. So we're nearly there in terms of today's proceedings. So Fergal Lynch, Dr. Fergal Lynch has kindly offered to be our rapporteur for today. I don't know if some of you and most of you will know Fergal. He's a former civil servant. He worked in a between policy and academic life role here for a number of years. And he's the chair of the National Council for Special Education. But he's a career civil servant with a significant experience behind him in all of these matters and a particular background in health and children. So we'll just give Fergal the floor for a few minutes to report back, and then we'll wrap up for the day. Thank you, Fergal.
Thanks very much indeed, John. It's great to be here, and thanks very much indeed, John, and thanks for your very kind words. It's lovely to be at this. This is the second of these events, given that we had one last year, which I think was hopefully equally successful. I'm always conscious as the last speaker, there's a couple of rules I apply. One is be clear, be relevant, and be seated. So I promise I'll do that as quickly as possible. Just a couple of reflections, really. I couldn't possibly do justice to everything that we've heard, but a number of things really struck home. So maybe just perhaps to reinforce them and a couple of thoughts in relation to it, and then we'll move on our way. Sally's presentation this morning, I thought, framed it beautifully, because she started off in relation to engagement. She just simply asked who, what, why, who with, so what, and what next. And I thought that was really, really good. And later on in the day, in the morning, somebody at the back asked, well, how do you convince somebody that this isn't all a waste of time? Which produced some very good answers, I think, from the panel as to why it's not a waste of time and the value of it. The other thing that she stressed, which is so obvious that you almost forget, and I as a former official would forget, politicians talk much more to the public on a day-to-day basis than we tend to. We mean to, but politicians do it all the time. And certainly when I was in the Department of Health and later in the Department of Children, I was always struck by ministers and their policy advisors who regularly had their finger well on the pulse, maybe much faster than I would have had in relation to issues, or in particularly emerging issues. And I know, obviously, in the consultation and public engagement area, that is your raison d'etre to talk to people. But I think it's a very important consideration to have at the back of your mind all of the time. The continuum that she set out as well, and still staying with Sally, this difference between simply informing, consulting, involving, collaborating, empowering. I thought that was very powerful in terms of the genuine nature of how you can expand and develop what you're actually doing. Informing is very, very basic, right through to empowering, which is something very, very different indeed. It was good the way she talked as well. I thought about the risks of engagement and remembering that the status quo carries its own risks. Doing nothing carries significant risks, and we shouldn't assume that the current is okay and that anything that we move to is a risk. Obviously it is as well, but looking at the status quo and what are the implications of that are important as well. A number of people throughout the day made the point about the importance of going out earlier in the engagement process than perhaps we're used to doing. Civil servants, I think officials, academics and others, don't wait for the political, don't wait to be asked, go and do, I think is a very, very good thing to do. A number of people also acknowledged the difficult timescales and different timescales perhaps between academia and the civil service, but that's not a reason not to go ahead and do what you're trying to achieve. From Una's point of view, I think she gave a lovely example of how in a very, very complex area they were able to simplify the complexity with a sort of a composite approach to government-based consultation rather than trying to do a whole load of different things. That in turn then led to an important point that was made and reinforced by a number of people, the fact that good consultation, good engagement is very much a highly resource-intensive issue. You need the capacity, you need to build that capacity, and you need to retain that capacity. And a number of people made that point in different ways. Another point that Una made, and I'm not going to go through every speaker, but just taking a couple of the ones that particularly struck me, she indirectly made the point about the trade-off that occurs in policy the whole time, and equally in consultation. But in policy, she used the example, I loved her example of the terminology, the energy trilemma, the difficulty in balancing affordability, security and decarbonisation, and that's just one example. But being able to get 2 out of 3 is okay, but getting all 3 is very difficult indeed. So that constant policy trade-off that we have in almost everything that we do, and certainly in the public engagement area, that is clearly the case. I was struck by something that Naomi said in relation to evidence building in advocacy for policy innovation, the importance of doing that and of using it. It's not just a case of consulting of itself, but the very fact that you can build an evidence base and use that evidence base for persuasive purposes. Paddy talked about making sure we don't just do what's easy for us or easy for the person or for the system. You have to go much further than that in terms of your consultation, and you've got to reach out. Tanya talked in a very interesting way about creative methods of engagement and gave a number of very practical examples. And Eleanor was talking about the challenge and the difficulty but importance of being able to distill something very, very lengthy and complex in a set of arguments to 2 or 3 main points. The elevator principle, she didn't use that terminology, but I think that's what she was talking about, getting something across very rapidly. And I think any of us who have been officials have been that soldier in terms of very quickly persuading or telling a minister, this is why we think we need that you need to do something. To be prepared to study and talk about failure, I thought was really, really good. I loved Murish's examples of the hospital groups, GDPR. I think he was very honest in the examples that he quoted. It's a cliche, but we definitely learn at least as much from failure in so many areas as we do in success. I would add to that our ability to do policy termination as opposed to policy continuation is a very challenged space in Ireland, and I think it's one that we need to look at. And again, the consultation process helps us in that direction and could help us in the direction of termination if necessary, or certainly substantial change if that is required. But learning from failure, be it in relation to consultation, engagement, or attempted policy implementation, is very, very important indeed. I was delighted that the policy handbook was launched, and well done to Liz and Barry and the team. A number of people in the room would have had some involvement in the early stages, including myself, in putting it all together. It's great to see it's there and in place. And I was very struck by what Naomi said, a statement of the obvious but really important. It's not only officials, public servants or civil servants who should or would be interested in this. NGOs are very interested in this as well. And I see in the Mentimeter, just saw some of the quick summary points. That request is made. Please circulate it around the university. The need for a person-centred approach to consultation. Again, perhaps a statement of the obvious, but very well worth repeating. We're not just talking about transactional stuff. Guarding against silos, acknowledging the fact that patient groups, when they're particularly focused on one area, risk getting into that area alone, and make sure that you go for a wider perspective. And then one that came a little bit later, but I think was extremely important, the point that Joe made about engagement versus involvement. Part of it is terminology, but part of it is a thought set, I suppose, a mindset. The importance of actually genuinely involving people in your consultations as opposed to something less than that. And he used the term, we need to co-design, we need to co-implement and co-evaluate. And I thought that was really powerful in the way it was described. Orla talked about behavioural economics and the shift towards behavioural economics, that people aren't things, and that reinforces the points that we made earlier. Equally about person-centredness, about listening and acting and so on, and the HSE's approach of care, compassion, trust and learning. And a number of people talked about building trust and relationship capital, I think was the term that Sally used, which I think is a really powerful way of describing the sort of trust and mutual respect relationship that you have to build up for this to happen. And I'm just going to finish with something that Tanya said, where she was talking about for effective public involvement and engagement. She talked about 4 things: mindsets, getting the mindset right; methods, doing the thing in the right way; capability and capacity, which we talked about as well; and leadership. And again, in the Mentimeter, it was interesting. Somebody said leadership was only mentioned once, but I think it was behind a lot of what we talked about today. So mindset, methods, capability and leadership, I think, were very, very good summaries of what we were about today. And I loved the plain English of Lamass as well that Mirish quoted, trying to achieve a progressive national community. It's a simpler language from the 1960s, but I think it's just as relevant today as it was then. So I hope in some way that captures at least some of what we heard today. I, for one, thoroughly enjoyed every minute of the conference. I hope you did too. And I got a huge amount out of it. There was much reinforcement and much repetition, which is right, but also some pretty good nuggets in terms of what we should be doing and where we should be thinking of next. This whole area of public engagement, public involvement, whatever way you want to describe it, in a way almost is at its infancy, although it has clearly developed a significant way beyond where it started. And certainly when I think back to the health strategy which Liz and I worked on a number of years ago, 20 plus years ago. You were only a babby at the time, Liz, don't worry. But when I think of the sort of consultation, which at the time was very, very substantial and significant and new, but compare that with what we do today, I think we've come a long way. But clearly we have a good deal more to go, and hopefully today has added to that in some way and made a contribution. Thanks very much.